to the information session for Towards 2040 Creative Leaders Fellowship. Today, we're going to just be talking a little bit about the fellowship, especially for those who are interested in it and interested in applying. So you can get all the information you need here. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat and we will answer them. If you have questions and you're seeing this outside of the live broadcast and are watching the recording, you can just type them in anyway and somebody will get back to you. But hopefully we'll answer all of your questions through this session. So we're going to go ahead and start. And if we can get the slides up as well. So this is Towards 2040, a Creative Leaders Fellowship, and it is being put on by Words, Beats, and Life. Next slide, please. So what we're going to go over today is talk a little bit about Words, Beats, and Life as an organization for those of you who may not be familiar with the organization itself. We'll talk through what Towards 2040, the Creative Fellows Leadership is. We'll also talk a little bit about this 2040 and why we're using that. Then we'll go through the actual application and the review process so you know what you're doing as you're applying. Finally, we'll answer the question, who should apply and who's involved in this fellowship itself. We'll go through the timeline to make sure that you know what you're committing to as you apply. And then finally, if there are questions, we'll take those at the end. And this should take somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour. So I just want to introduce everybody to Words, Beats, and Life really quickly. Words, Beats, and Life is a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. It does a lot of work in the DMV or the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. It also does work around the country, around the United States, as well as around the globe. One of the things Words, Beats, and Life does is run the Academy. These are classes that we believe fall into the kind of hip hop, quote unquote, the hip hop sector. And they're classes for young people. There's also a track of the creative economy, which is thinking about the pipeline that goes from learning about the arts and how to work in them and getting us to whether it's professional, whether it's side hustles, but how do you really work in that creative economy and that sector? WBL is also centering marginalized voices. We're thinking about folks whose voices are not usually heard, are not front and center, and how we present those through festivals, through hip hop journals, the Journal of Hip Hop Culture, through teach-ins, through gallery shows, through poetry slams, all sorts of things like that. We are also working on cultural diplomacy in the way that we call it cultural diplomacy, whether that's connecting folks within the same city, whether that's connecting folks across the world. We're also convening people together to discuss best practices within hip hop culture. So as you can see, WBL is taking on a lot. It's a robust hip hop organization and nonprofit that's been around for about 20 years now. And a lot of the work that we're doing with this fellowship is really to think about what the next 20 years look like. And we'll get back into this idea of 2040 in a little bit. But why don't we move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about the fellowship itself. So again, this is Towards 2040 Creative Leaders Fellowship. And we'll talk a little bit now about what that means and what it entails. Next slide, please. So I'll start by saying that we are recruiting through an open call process. And what that means is that anyone can apply, really, if you meet the general criteria. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But we are only going to select 5 national fellows from the hip hop community. National meaning if you're considered part of the United States, and from the hip hop community is something that you self-identify as. The fellowship itself is going to be 9 months long. So it'll go from July of this year to March of next year. Within those 9 months, they're going to be monthly, what we're calling solution sessions. So these 5 people that build up this cohort are going to meet monthly, virtually. They're going to come together. They will have a facilitator, which will be me. And they will have guest folks that are content area experts coming in to talk about a particular topic for that month. But the idea really is that those 5 people are looking towards solutions for the future, solutions for their community, solutions to some of the problems we face, whether it's as a hip hop community, whether it's in a particular city, whatever it may be. But there's also a fair bit of training, ideating, and coming up with those solutions in these monthly sessions. The next aspect of the fellowship is peer-to-peer mentoring. This idea that each fellow should have somebody that they can talk to as a thought partner, as somebody who they can kind of bounce ideas off of, as somebody who's maybe done things that they haven't that can kind of help them. But we're not really looking at it as like a hierarchical or top-down approach. We're really looking at it as talking to somebody else who's within the hip hop community, who's working on similar things, and can maybe just offer advice or an approach that may be different from yours. So each of the fellows will have an individual mentor, and that the fellow and the mentor pairs will meet once a month as well, outside of those other sessions. And it's up to them when they decide to meet and how they decide to meet. Um, Another thing that is an aspect of this fellowship is a $10,000 stipend. So over the length of this fellowship, fellows will be receiving a stipend. We think this is really important because you're putting in work, even if it's self-growth, even if it's working on your own projects. It's important for us to say that there is something for the fellows in this as well, because at the end of the day, it's taking time. And we are asking people to be committed, of course, for all of the sessions. So that $10,000 stipend is for the fellows to do with what they please. If we can get the slide back, thank you. And then in addition to that $10,000 stipend, there's also support for community projects. And what we mean by support is there would be cash support for the projects that the fellows are working on. So we're imagining that each fellow that is a part of this has a project that's considered a community project that they're working on. That community project can be something that's happening physically in their own community. It can be virtual. It can be nationwide. It can be a number of things. And we'll talk a little bit more about how this community project relates to this idea of towards 2040 in just a second. But what we're saying here is that Words Beats and Life will invest money into these projects as long as they're viable projects, and will also help these projects have access to the networks that Words Beats and Life has, as well as other people that may be interested in supporting it with resources that don't always have to be monetary resources. Lastly, I will say that this fellowship is mostly virtual. We do think it's important to gather in person, but that in-person gathering will happen at least once and possibly more than that. So that is the fellowship in a nutshell. You can also go to our website, which we will put up soon, and get some of this on there. We know that there might be questions. I see that there's people tuned in, and we can take those questions at the end. We'll kind of go through the presentation first. So we're going to talk a little bit about why 2040 next. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. In 2040, hip hop will be over 65 years old. Words Beats and Life as an organization will be approaching 40 years. We believe that by 2040, hip hop will have evolved itself again from an aspirational culture and set of values to an outcome-driven, design-centered cultural practice that lives in communities across the globe and ensures justice and equality for all that encounter it. So I want to take you back a little bit and just say that in 2020, as the pandemic was full underway, WBL was going through a strategic planning process that was 5 years. And we started thinking beyond that and thinking, well, that's okay, but what does this work that we've been doing for 20 years look like another 20 years into the future? What does it look like in 2040? And by work, we don't just mean the work that the organization is doing. We're thinking about the hip hop community as a whole, not just in the US, but really globally. What is it that we can say that we've done as a community that has made our world a better place to live in? And with that prompt, we started gathering these global think tanks and gathering folks to think about what that vision really for 2040 could look like. And through that process, we came up with a bunch of different kind of ideas, priorities, and an imagining of our world in 2040. That was a really important thing for us to do because it gave us this vision that goes beyond just 5 years, goes beyond our organization, and really is about that change making, that imagining of a world or of a future that we can all live in. While we were doing that, we realized, well, if it's going to be 20 years and all of us are going to be 20 years older that are talking about this, who are those people that are helping us get there? Whether they're doing that now in 2022 or they're doing that in 2039. And of course, that vision is going to keep evolving. And one of the things that we kept coming back to was that we need to be supporting leaders from our communities that are going to be those change makers, that are currently those change makers, as well as those that are going to be in the next generation and the generation after that. How do we support them? So the idea came that in order to do that, in order to head towards 2040, we needed the creative leaders from our community to be supported. And that's how the Towards 2040 Creative Leaders Fellowship was born, with the idea that every year we would recruit at least 5 fellows, maybe more in the future, but that every year for about 20 years, we would recruit them and we would create this network of at least 100 fellows that are kind of getting us towards these goals. So I would encourage you to go to the WBL website, wblinc.org, and look at that vision for 2040, because it's really connected to this fellowship. And anybody who's applying should really be in line and in tune with that vision. Which takes us to this next slide. How do I apply and how do I get in? And there's some questions coming in that are important, and we'll go through those. So wblinc.org/towards2040 will give you information on the fellowship itself. It'll also give you information on the vision. So you can check both of those out there. If you haven't had a second, please take this link down. Maybe we can put it in the chat as well. But this is an important link where you'll find what you need to find for the fellowship. So I'll leave it up there for another 5 seconds or so everybody can get this. All right, we will go to the next slide. So here is the fellowship application. If you went to this is what you would see. I will say that if you don't have a Google account, you're going to have to create one. And the reason is we're asking you to upload documents. And the only way you can do that is if you have a Google account. If that for some reason is a huge issue for anyone, there's an email on this application that you can check out. And that email, if you email us, we can kind of help guide you through it. But you should have a Google account in order to apply. The eligibility requirements are that you have to be 21 years of age or older, you are based in the United States, and you self-identify as a part of the hip hop community. If you meet those 3 requirements, you can apply. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So it's going to ask you some basic things here. You would put your first and your last name, you would put your email address, and you would put your phone number. These are important, so we know how to get a hold of you and contact you, but they should be pretty straightforward. Next, we're going to be going into some of kind of the ideas of who we're reaching. We're committed to having our fellows reflect the diversity of the hip hop community and the world we live in. So we want these answers, so we're making sure that we're doing that. So the first question is just asking, where do you live? I think you can define that pretty straightforward. It can be the city you live in. It can be the nation you're a part of. It can be however you define that in terms of where you live. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. The next thing we are asking is, where do you call home? We know that our folks are often nomadic as well. We know that the pandemic means people have multiple places they live or call home. This is an open-ended question to find out where you call home and what that means to you. Next, we ask, how do you describe your race and or ethnicity? We're also intentional about not having checkboxes here, because we find that those that exist on the census and other things can be problematic for people that have multiple racial or ethnic identities, or who don't identify in the same way that other people choose to categorize them. So this is, again, an open-ended question, really for us to make sure we're reaching out to as many people as possible. And in the same way, we ask, how do you describe your gender? Because we know for a lot of people that is also a spectrum and maybe not as easily defined as a checkbox. So here's your opportunity to define it any way you would like to define it. The final question on this slide, at least, is please indicate your age range. Here, we do have some checkboxes, but if you prefer not to answer, that's totally cool as well. We're just trying to see who we're reaching out to, and also showing that you can be of any age as long as it's 21 and up and apply for this. We're not trying to say that this is only for people of a certain age bracket. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. And the last questions in these, the last question in this stage of the application is, do you consider yourself to have a self-identified disability, impairment, learning difference, or long-term condition? Again, we're not asking you to define what that is here. We're just asking if you do, and we can kind of dig into that if you're selected and make sure that we are meeting the needs of all of the fellows that are selected. So again, you can say yes, no. You can also say prefer not to answer for this one. So that's the first kind of part of the application. All of that should be pretty straightforward. And I will let you know that you're not necessarily being judged on this part of the application. This is just kind of our intake. We can go ahead and go to the next page. So this part of the application, we're asking you for a little bit more about yourself. Here, we're going to ask you to provide a short bio. It should be 250 words or less about you and your work. This is really your chance in writing just to say what you do, who you are. If you already have this written up somewhere, just feel free to copy and paste it, honestly. It's just kind of a quick introduction to who you are in writing. The next question is, do you consider yourself an artist? If so, what forms of art do you explore? You do not have to consider yourself an artist to apply. We just want to know if you do here. So again, this is just more to get to know about who you are. So if you are an artist, you can say yes, and then you can tell us what that means to you. What kind of art do you do, and how do you consider yourself exploring it? If you're not an artist, you can simply just say you don't consider yourself an artist and leave it at that. Or if you want to explain why not, you can also explain that. Again, it is open-ended. And I would probably fill out about a paragraph or so here. The last one is, do you consider yourself a member of the hip hop community? And if so, how? This might be a little bit of a trick question because we do want members of the hip hop community applying. So hopefully everybody who applies says yes to this, but we're interested in knowing what your relationship to hip hop and the hip hop community is. Again, this is open for you to define. And I would consider this about a paragraph long answer. These are open-ended intentionally. We will take these into consideration in your application. And we'll leave it at that and go to the next slide. Now, this next section, or these next few sections, are really, really important. This part especially, this is a personal statement, and it's in the form of a video. That video should be 5 minutes or less. It can be less. It is a personal statement about introducing yourself on video, speaking about yourself, or telling us about yourself, and describing why you are interested in the fellowship and why this is the right time for you to apply. We'd like to hear about why this opportunity speaks to you and why you're choosing to apply. You can upload this video to a number of different mediums, from YouTube and Vimeo to Dropbox or Google Drive. All you have to do is just send us a link to where we can find that video. And you can be as creative as you want in your video, as straightforward. You can have it live wherever you want. Just send us the link and we'll be able to see this. This is important because it'll get us to understand why this speaks to you in the fullness of what it is and in the fullness of who you are. So I would say to pay special attention to this video and make sure you're conveying what you want to convey. It doesn't have to be highly produced, but it should be clear about what you're trying to communicate to us as an organization and to the reviewers. All right, we can go ahead and go to the next one. So the next part is equally important, and this is a project description. Here we're asking you to either attach a document or to use a link that describes a project that you would like to work on during the fellowship. The project should implement creative solutions that will help a community or communities actualize the vision for 2040. Here you can check out the link for the 2040 vision, and you'll see that it's really expansive and probably aligns with a lot of us already. The project can be an expansion on existing work, and it can be based anywhere, or it can be virtual. The project can take on the form of a creative intervention, an exhibition, an artwork, a performance, a production, an ongoing initiative, an organizing initiative, or anything else you can imagine. The project can be pre-existing or brand new. So this should basically convey to you that these projects don't have to be a certain way. They don't have to be defined by us or by anybody else. They just need to be something that you're working on or are interested in working on. Do they have to exist already? No. Could it be a brand new idea? Absolutely. Could this fellowship inspire you with an idea? Absolutely. So, but we do want you to think about an idea. And because it's an idea, whether it's completely fully fleshed out and you've been doing it for years or it's brand new, those are equally valid. And I would like everybody to just think about an idea that's close to their heart and an idea that this fellowship can help you either actualize or expand. And an idea that 20 years from now would still be something that was important to have been done at that time. And that idea should live, when we say community or communities, what we mean is that idea should live beyond you as an individual. So, for example, if you thought this was a great chance to record an album, but that album was really personal, there wasn't a community outreach element to it, and it wasn't going to, change the world in some way, then maybe that's not the project for this particular fellowship. Not that you shouldn't do that album anyway. But if you're recording an album that's speaking about some of the issues that are present in this vision for 2040, and there's an outreach component to it, and you're going to involve community, and there's going to be engagement sessions, and other people are going to be a part of it, then maybe that is valid. But the reason I'm giving that example is to make sure that community is involved and that community is at the center, and it's open as to how you define community. I know there may be questions about this in particular. This is an important part, and I want to make sure that people are clear about this aspect. So what are you uploading and what links are you giving? An example could be if there's an existing project and you have a website or a page or a portfolio page that describes that project, you can just give us a link to that, and it's easy as that. If it's a new idea and you want to build a website for it, just for this, that's fine too. If instead you're like, you know what, this is a fresh idea and I'm just going to write a page, a few pages, several pages, you can just upload a file that's those pages. If you want to get fancy and submit a PDF that's really well designed, that has images, that has maps and flowcharts and ideas of how you're thinking and what's going to happen, great, you can do that too. The point is that this is not limited to what we're seeing. You can be as imaginative as you want, as creative as you want. If you want to have another video and link that or upload something like that, that's fine as well. So the project description can really be as imaginative or as straightforward as you want it to be. I hope that kind of explains what the projects we're looking for in the project description. And again, if you have questions, feel free to tell us now or to reach out later within the chat. We're going to go ahead and go to the next slide. Here is the last section of the application. Hopefully the application is not overwhelming. We're trying to make it as straightforward and simple as possible because we know that a lot of these applications have you jump through a lot of hoops, and we want people to feel like this is accessible. And it may take time to think through, but you at least understand what we're asking for. So this last section is really just about your experience now. We want to know more about your creative work and your experience. And we'd like you to share one or more of the following to help us learn more about you. It can be one or it can be all of them. So it's really up to you, but it has to be at least one so that we can just get a sense of who you are in your creative work. So you can upload a resume or a CV. You can direct us to some work samples or upload them. You can direct us to your portfolio. You can direct us to a website. You can even direct us to your social media. Any of that works, but it should just speak to the work you do in the creative sector as a part of the hip hop community. And I can see that taking place in many, many different ways. Again, it can be a website of an organization you work for. It could be a link to an album. It can be your Instagram because it's just curated really well around your work. You could give us your resume or CV. Work samples could really be anything from writing to music to performance to community organizing to just your thought process. So any of those are valid. And when we're reviewing, we will be reviewing the personal statement that's sent on a video, the project description, and we will be looking at your creative experience as well. I hope that describes this application process. I hope that it's clear. And if we haven't answered anything, again, feel free to ask us now or feel free to ask us later. We're here to help. These applications are due on April 30th. So from the airing of this, you do still have about 3 weeks to go, which should be plenty of time for anyone to complete the application. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. I do want to talk a little bit now about the review process and talk about what the folks that are reviewing are looking for to make sure that you have a strong application. There are 5 people that will be reviewing the applications. They're all from the WBL staff. They do not include me. So I'm here to answer questions, but I will not be reviewing the applications. We will be giving points for the video personal statement. That's a really important part, like I said. We will also be giving points for the project description. That's equally important. And the video personal statement is who you are, and the project description is your ideas and what you're hoping to do. You can look at it in that way. We will also give points for your existing experience. So what you've done will be considered. We'll give extras for anything else. And what we mean by that is your bio, your description of yourself, whether you're an artist or a part of the hip hop community. Those are extras. They're getting to know you better. They're not necessarily things that'll give you points per se, but they may be extras if in case they're really close applications. There will also be consensus here on building a cohort. This is an important part. We're approaching this a little bit differently. We're not just looking for the applications that score the highest with points or are just the most stellar. We're looking at these 5 people together. We're going to look and see, like, does it make sense to recruit these 5 people for this fellowship? Because these 5 people are going to be spending a lot of time together over the next 9 months and hopefully over the next several decades. We're hoping that we're building a cohort that'll want to work together beyond this process as well. They're going to be helping each other. They're going to be mentors to each other as well. They're going to be thought partners. And though they may be working on individual projects, we would hope that the other members of this cohort, the other fellows, are chiming in on what they're working on as well. So a part of the review process will include the fact that we're hoping that all 5 of these people aren't exactly alike in many different ways, because in their difference, there will be strength and there will be an importance of being unique from each other, whether that's from their skill sets, where they come from, or what they're able to provide for each other. That's the review process in a nutshell. I hope that answers what people may have questions about in terms of how to apply and in terms of how to play to their strengths and what the reviewers may be looking for. Now, there's a question of, should I apply? And this is another one of those trick questions. If you're sitting through this, if you've listened for the last 30 minutes or so, and if you've considered applying, you should absolutely apply. As long as you're over the age of 21, you're in what is considered the United States, even if it's contested, and you are a part of the hip hop community and nobody else needs to define that but yourself, then you should go ahead and apply. We've had a lot of people ask if they should, and the answer is, if you think you should apply, you should absolutely apply. I will say, there have been questions such as, can we apply as a group, as a duo, as a collective? Do we have to be a nonprofit organization? This fellowship is really specifically for individuals. We feel like there isn't enough support for individuals, so we want to make sure that this is for individuals. In the future, we may consider something that's more than an individual, but you absolutely do not have to be incorporated as anything to apply. If you're part of an organization or you have a nonprofit, great, but you don't have to have that. We'll go to the next slide. I do want to share with you who all is involved, who is part of the 2040 Towards 2040 team. So I am the facilitator. My name is Asad Ali Jafri. I'm an artist, a cultural producer, and a community organizer. And I've been helping design this fellowship. I also have experience being a fellow as well as running other fellowships. We also have curriculum designers that are all affiliated with Georgetown University in some way, shape, or form, that are kind of experts at designing curriculum and design in general, that are helping us to think through the monthly sessions that we have. And that hopefully will cater this to the 5 fellows that are selected as well. Besides that, we have a team of 5 mentors. Those mentors have been selected already. We will be sharing them through our social media, through our email, and on the website in the next 2 weeks. So look out for that. And those mentors will then be paired with a fellow each. We also have content area experts. Each monthly session that will take place virtually, each convening will have an individual that'll come and kind of train folks on the different topics that they're interested in. So if there's an interest in, how do I fundraise, or how do I answer this big question about universal design for communities, we'll have people that are experts in that area in particular come and not just teach as if like I'm talking to you right now, but really have a conversation. There's a reason that there's only 5 fellows. And one of those reasons is that we want this to be a small group and a conversation. So these sessions will be conversational sessions. with these content area experts. Lastly, we have the WBL staff and board. We have Mazi Mutafa, who is our executive director and founder, who's been an integral part of designing this as well, and will be accessible to fellows. We also have the rest of the WBL staff, the teaching artists, the board. And I would say we really have the network that WBL is a part of. And that network will be accessible intentionally, our partners, even our funders, to these fellows. We really want to be expansive in our vision. So there's a great team behind the support of these 5 fellows. And we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. There's a timeline, of course, like all things. And the timeline is that April 30th applications close. I encourage you to get your application in before that. Technology has a way of not being in our favor when things are due. And this is April 30th would be midnight, wherever you are, whatever your time zone is in the US, midnight, April 30th is when they're due. Try to get it in before that. Even if it's April 29th, I highly recommend that you get it in before. That way, if there's any issues with your application, if it comes in before the 30th, we'll make sure to get a hold of you and let you know that there's an issue. So I would encourage you to apply before the deadline. May 27th is when the selected fellows will be notified. So if you are a fellow, you should expect to know by May 27th. And by June 10th, we'll make a public announcement. What happens if you aren't a fellow? Somewhere between the May 27th and June 10th, you will be notified. So before the public announcement, you will be notified whether you made it or whether you didn't. On June 10th, we'll publicly announce. Everybody will know at that point. And on July 1st, the fellowship will begin. That doesn't mean we'll have our first session on July 1st. It just means that's the first of the month. And we'll start our monthly sessions at that point. We are scheduling in the early November an in-person gathering in Washington, D.C. We're going to make sure that all the fellows can make that. If for some reason you're like, I really want to do this, but in November I can't make it in person, don't worry about it. Apply anyway. That's not a big deal. We'll work around it, and we'll make sure that everybody is involved as much as they can be, and we'll make sure it's accessible for everybody in all of the ways that they need it. The fellowship will end in March. We've put down March 31st because that's the end of the month. That month, we will also be asking the fellows to share where they are with their projects, what they've learned, and kind of contributing to this learning community that we have going. So fellows should be available generally from June through March. This is not a job. This is not a full-time or part-time job. This is a fellowship. So as long as you're available for those monthly sessions, you're available for your mentoring sessions, and you're working on your project, that's what we're asking out of you for these 9 to 10 months. We fully expect that people will be working on other things as well during this time, whether that's jobs, side hustles, working as an artist, whatever it may be. We expect that you'll still be doing that as well, and you'll have time to do it all. We'll go ahead and go to the next. Well, we're going to open it up to questions now. I see that there have been a few, and I'll just answer them on camera because I do think it's important to do that. One was, does an applicant have to have a nonprofit to be eligible? Absolutely not. You can apply as an individual. You just have to exist in this universe, be 21 and over, be based in what's considered the United States, and be a member of the hip hop community. Another question is, will this presentation be available after its live iteration? Yes, and if you're watching this now, you will see that it's available because the recording will stay up. Is there flexibility to change the project as we have conversations with our people in our cohort? Absolutely. We're not asking you to pitch a project that you're going to stick to absolutely. We're asking you to pitch a project that's an idea, really, and an idea that's well thought and has been fleshed out in your mind. But the point is, within this cohort, within this fellowship, you should get input, you should get training, you should get mentorship and experience so that hopefully the idea is different by the end of the fellowship. I think that's important because we want the ideas to grow. So it is okay that the project evolves as the fellowship does. Is this the first cohort? This is the first cohort. This is the first year. So if you're selected for this, it'll be great because you'll be part of the first year. It is hopefully not the last. We really are thinking that this will go on till at least 2040 and hopefully for a full 20 years. That's how we are committing to this. Of course, we can't control the future, but that's what we're committed to as of now. I will say this: if you're applying, definitely do apply. If you do not get selected, do not think that your application wasn't good enough or you don't kind of meet some kind of criteria. We are looking to build a cohort, and we are fully expecting that people who are not part of that cohort this year will apply in future years. And we will come up with ways to make it simple and straightforward as possible to apply. But you should definitely keep applying. And we want to make sure that people that apply are still plugged into the network, even if they're not a fellow. And we will come up with ways to do that. So please feel as if you're a part of the Words Beats and Life family if you're applying, or even if you're watching this and not applying, because this is supposed to be expansive for all of those people. How many applicants will be selected? Great question. We will be selecting 5 fellows for this first cohort. So regardless of how many applications we get, we're selecting 5 fellows. There was another question that I answered earlier, but I'll answer now, of whether or not a group or a duo or a collective can apply. This is set up for individuals because we're trying to keep that 5-person team kind of small. It might be influenced by other popular culture fives, but I'll leave that alone for now. We are trying to get 5 individuals, and they will have mentors. They will have a team of experts. So it'll be more expansive than that. But as far as fellows are concerned, 5. We're doing great on time. We haven't even hit 40 minutes, but I think this was informative. Hopefully it was. I think we've got some really good questions. I'll wait for another minute or two to see if there are any other questions. If there are, we're happy to answer. And if not, you can always kind of drop them in later and we'll answer them later as well. There's also an email address on the application. You can find that there. It's my email address, and I'd be happy to answer more questions as we move forward. I will say we're not making it public who the reviewers are intentionally. There isn't any favoritism. I don't get to judge any of the applications. This is really going to be based on your application and the strength of it. We do have another question. Will alternates be selected in case someone in the original cohort can't complete the obligations? That is a great question. We will have, not for the public, but we will select an additional 5 people. And we're hoping that's really for if in between being selected and the fellowship starts, somebody says, you know what, I signed up, but now I have this other thing, or I really can't do this, then we will go to that list. And to be completely honest, we haven't thought about what happens in the case of if in between somebody can't continue. So we'll have to get back to you on that question. Can you briefly describe the type of projects you all are looking for? That's a really, really great question. It's hard to answer, to be honest, because I don't want to necessarily talk about projects that people are like give ideas to people of projects or give favoritism to them right now. But I think what I can do is talk about a project that I'm working on, because obviously I'm not applying as I'm part of the facilitator. But I can definitely talk about one of my own projects. I'm working on a project here in Chicago on Devon Avenue, which is also known as Little India, to bring back arts and kind of have like a vibrant arts community on a street that has a lot of food from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. It has a lot of fashion. It has a lot of jewelry and other things, a lot of transactions, a lot of people coming in and out, a lot of people living there, of course, and owning businesses. But where is the space for young people to just hang out? Where is the space for the elders to share their stories? Where are the spaces for arts to be made, for culture to be produced? And that's limited. So last summer, we came up with this project called Ao Mill, which just means let's get together. We call it Ao Mill Come Through. And we just started taking over street corners and having events with DJs, with music. We had a poetry session. We had a chai battle. We had a game night. We did all sorts of things. And it was great because people came out. Tons of people came out. People were walking up and down the street and we're just like, what's going on here? The businesses encouraged us. We did it without permits because we thought we wanted to just do it street level and just see how far we could go. And it was great. And we did so well that we added an extra event. We got a truck to come in that's done in like the Pakistani truck art style, which are just these great visual art masterpieces. The truck came out, we opened up the truck and used it as a stage, and we just had a great time. If I was applying, I would apply with that project and say that I want to expand that because we did it out of our own pockets. We didn't ask anybody for money. We did it as a collective. We had no hierarchy, but we want to grow it. And we're thinking, how do we grow it? And with a cohort, with mentorship, with resources, we could really grow it and make an impact in the community. That's an example I can give. That's a real example, but it could be completely different than that. We do have another question. With an artist working on an album, can you give some tips of what you're looking for when it comes to music artists? That's another great question. These projects should speak to the priorities. That's a really good point as well. The 2040 vision is a big and massive, expansive vision. What I've described to you fits in that 2040 vision. What you're working on may fit, but we want to make sure it's aligned with this 2040 vision. So the question is, what about an artist? What are we looking for from a musical artist, right? I would say that a musical artist who's looking to expand beyond what they're doing and looking to engage community with their work, right? Think about the people that are listening to their music. Think about the performances that they're doing. Think about the workshops that they may be doing as well. Think about what the life is of recorded music beyond making that recording and what happens to it and how that music inspires change, creates change. Could there be a curriculum that goes along with an album? And how that meets this idea for a future that is for our world, a future of like radical love, a future that really includes all of us. How does it speak to that? And if you look through the 2040 vision, you'll see some really, really specific examples and some general examples. And if it speaks to that and it's building towards that, then that musical album, that album as an artist, that working as a musician can speak to this fellowship really well. Also, if you're an artist that usually records or an artist that usually performs and is thinking, what else can I do? This is great for you because you can think about how you can be involved in the arts ecosystem, in the hip hop ecosystem, outside of always having to record or perform to make money. Maybe there's other things you can do that are community invested, but are also helping you pay the bills. And this is definitely for you if you're thinking about that as well. I would say go to the 2040 vision. We're not saying like, what you're working on has to fit one of those like sentences or images directly because maybe it doesn't. And that's okay. But if you can get the gist of the bigger vision and what we're trying to do and say, and all you have to do is explain to us, right? Oh, this is how it connects to this larger vision. That's good enough. You don't have to have it be like a, apples to apples example. It's definitely about aligning and not fitting in. We're not trying to force people to fit a vision that a group of people came up with. We're just making sure that it aligns. And it's almost a gut check, right? If you look at that vision and it speaks to you, then you should definitely apply and have a project in mind. If you look at that vision and you say, they're talking about some stuff that I can't get down with, then maybe this is not the fellowship for you. But I would assume that if you're on this call and you've listened this far and you're either involved already or you know about Words Beats in Life or you're part of the hip hop community, hopefully you'll look at that vision and it'll speak to you and you'll say, yes, I'm down with this. And I want to add to the vision and I want to grow the vision. And also the vision is not set in stone. The vision that was created in 2020 by 2025 should expand. By 2030, hopefully it's looking different. And by the time we hit 2040, hopefully there's a whole new vision for the future. So keep that in mind as well. We're coming close to the 45-minute mark. We're hitting about an hour from when we said we were going to start. So if there aren't any more questions or comments, I'm going to take it to a close. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank you for applying, considering applying. If you've looked at this and said, you know what, I don't really fit, and you can honestly say that, that's okay. Share this with someone. I'm sure if you've watched this and you've listened, you know people in your network and in your community. And in the spirit of community and collaboration, share it widely. I don't think we should just keep this to ourselves and hope nobody else applies so we have a better chance. I think that's that's anti the spirit of this kind of a fellowship. It's really about bringing people together. So we really hope a lot more people apply because then we'll get to know about your work as well. And hopefully there's other opportunities, even if you're not selected as a fellow. So share this widely, be excited about it. Look out for our mentors announcement that will be coming up soon. And we hope to see you as a fellow, and we hope to just see your applications and learn more about you. My name is Asad Ali Jaffrey. This is the info session for Words, Beats, and Life towards 2040 Creative Leaders Fellowship. Thank you for joining us.
Ideas, they shake you out of your sleep like when a toddler creeps. Totality of the deep, the mere thought of an unconscious manifestation carried out with the beat. Positive charged protons creating neural explosions. Time hiccups when fingers and pads touch. Dead air smiles because it knows what's coming. The countenance of the clock claps hands. The choreography of the knock slaps jams. And you be like, who made this? Vertebrae responding to the call so bad they make a B-girl curve the wall.